Yes. Woo. The volume works too. I turned that on so we could just test that. Nope. Now it seems to be working. Very good. Volume sound okay? Reasonable? Yeah. Oh, it is a little toasty, isn't it? Hey there, Mr. Panky. How are you this morning? How's the knee, Pam? How's the knee? Didn't they have a procedure on the knee? Anyway, if if you really want to get rid of your pain, get you a beehive. Yes. Well, strategically and one at a time, you place the sting where you need it. Your body will produce cortisone automatically.
Yeah, I can remember the beehives when I was little. We would go, had to pass them to get to the creek. And it was two cousins and myself. And the one with the curly hair was always the one that caught the honeybee in her hair. Not the rest of my other cousin now, we could get by with no problem. But her curly hair,
That drew them, huh?
I always had.
Yeah, well, Nope, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV, so don't do that based entirely on what I say. But anyway, are we good, Doreen? Good morning, everyone. Oh, okay. We'll get started with some of the preliminaries anyway. Okay, good. This is the turquoise section right here. All of y'all color coordinated this morning for church today. So next week maybe y'all can all color coordinate with camouflage. That would be kind of cool. But good morning. Good to see everyone here today. Welcome to Sunday School. Prayer concerns. Obviously, we want to remember our pastor. I'm looking through foggy glasses this morning. Remember our pastor, tying up loose ends and all of the stuff that happens when you lose a parent. So above and beyond all of the sorrow and grief from that, he's dealing with the business side of it and tying up all of those personal matters, which sometimes is more of a struggle than the loss, isn't it? We've all been there and experienced it. So pray for him if you think about it this week. Maybe write him a note, send him an email, shoot him a text, let him know you're praying for him. That means a lot. What other prayer concerns do you have? All righty. Let's remember Mr. Stevens then. Troubling time. Anything else? Do we have an update on Nathan? Anybody know any news on Nathan? All right, well.
Just what they said last Sunday.
Okay. Yeah. All right, well, let's continue to remember him in prayer. Yeah, the heart procedure was done. Last text I had gotten, there was maybe some concerns about infection or some bleeding and such. So, oh, good, good. Well, that's good news. All right.
Are they going to be able to fly home? Because I know one time they went out and had to drive back.
Oh my. Well. All right, well, let's remember them for health recovering and also for safe travels, whether it is by car or by plane for sure. Anything else? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. And I intentionally left out a little bit of the preamble and build up here. Found that we were spending half of our Sunday school lesson setting up the Sunday school lesson, so trying to figure out a way to jump in a little bit quicker. You may notice it being a little bit shorter. But we do have some interesting stuff to talk about. I had control, but now I don't. Okay, good. Wait a minute. There we go. Okay, question number one. If you looked in your Sunday school, if you read your Sunday school lesson, you saw this in your book. What are some topics you're always ready to talk about? Flowers? Children, by the way, congratulations, Grandma. That was a praise that we should have mentioned during prayer time. Our pastor and his wife are grandparents again to a right cute little baby girl. And the best news is she doesn't favor David at all. So I already said she was cute, didn't I? Got you back, David. I know you're listening. Okay.
Bobby said cows.
Cows. There you go. Flowers, grandkids, children, cows. Health. Wow, there you go. That becomes important in the topic of conversation. What else? Politics. Things you like to talk about or always ready to jump in with. Politics.
I avoid that.
And some of us avoid it. That's right. Some of us run to it. What else? Y'all have named everything I put up there on the next screen. I wanted you to come up with something different that I didn't think about. Huh? Crafts, hobbies. There you go. That's a good one. Yeah, you always want to talk about your favorite hobbies. Sports. There you go. Sports. What did you say? Traveling. Yeah. Religion. The purpose of today's Sunday school lesson. Good one, Irvin. Family. New cars. New boats. Toys. There you go. Aches and pains. You know, we're always ready to tell you about that. How about stock market or bank accounts? You ever met people who just want to tell you about their stocks? Conversation always comes around to that. Politics, your favorite sports teams. Beekeeping, that's one put in there. Some of the people in here will know if you get around any beekeepers, the topic will come up. You know, you'll be in Sunday school talking about bee sting therapy. All right, here you go. Gardening. Who said flowers, cows, the agricultural side of it? That picture right there is a picture of a squash plant in our garden. And I went out there the other day, and there was the first bloom on it with the little squash coming. So I took a picture of it and sent it to all my friends and said, ha ha, I'll be picking squash in 2 weeks. So always ready to talk about gardening. But there are a lot of things that we talk about. Well, here's a story of a person who was a new Christian and rather excited about it. So they used to ride a commuter train and read the Bible, study their Bible on the commuter train. It was a great time to get caught up on that. And said on one occasion, a woman sat down next to me while my Bible was open, and she kept peering over at what I was doing. This irritated me. You ever sit there and somebody's looking over your shoulder or whatever? It is irritating, isn't it? This nosy woman was interrupting my Bible study time. I shifted slightly away from her, but she only leaned in further. Finally, I stopped reading, placed my hand over the open Bible, and looked directly at her. She certainly noticed that. After an awkward moment, I was convicted to engage in conversation. I remember that my morning prayer had been for God to give me an opportunity to share Jesus with someone. That opportunity was right now beside me, and I almost missed it because I was so focused on my own time with the Lord. Imagine that. You pray in the morning, God, give me an opportunity to share the gospel with someone. You go on the trains, they sit down right next to you, and you go away. Go away. And that's what this girl was doing. Well, she finally realized, you know what? She got an answer to her prayer. And we do stuff like that too, don't we? Whenever we're having conversations with people, we get caught up in whatever's going on or whatever's important to us at that particular time, and we forget to think, maybe God put that person here in this conversation I'm in for a reason, and that reason might be to share Christ. There's your box. We have windows of opportunity every day, but we can easily miss them. Jesus wants to tell his story through us, and we need, we need to be ready to share. All right, talking about topics, things you want to talk about. Parade Magazine had an article called Let's Talk. 250 perfect conversation starters for any social situation. They came up with some topics. 250 topics to start a conversation with somebody. Could you name 250 topics to talk about with people? Ask somebody what made you smile today. You think that would generate a conversation? I bet it would. What was the last good book you read? That's going to open some doors. What do you think is the best show on Netflix right now? That wouldn't work for us. I don't even know how you get on Netflix. Means nothing to me. But some people might. Are you a cat person or a dog person? Well, that's sure to generate some stuff. Your strangest hidden talent. What superpower do you wish you could have? That would be good if you were talking to children, young people, wouldn't it? Maybe even adults. And then, of course, something talking about holidays and what you got for your birthday or what you did for your birthday. The point is, there are lots and lots and lots of ways to engage people in conversation. And nowadays, for whatever reason, conversation is not quite as common as it used to be. We get out in public settings and, I don't know, it seems like a generation or two ago, people would engage the person they were with. We talk to each other, and now there's a wall around us. We're all, I'll spend my time on my phone, you spend your time on your phone. If you want to talk to me, send me a text, and we'll communicate that way. The world has broken down, and we're losing this, but we need to think about opportunities to talk with each other. So today's title is sharing the message of the gospel in daily conversations, and all of those times where we're going to pop up, people are going to pop up in our life like that woman on the train. Why are we moving forward here? Their point was our daily conversations are opportunities to share Christ. I saw this one in one of the commentaries that I thought was a better point. God does not call all people to be preachers, but he does command all of us to share the good news of Jesus. So to me, that's a better point. We all have a requirement or a command placed upon us to share the gospel with people. And we all have lots of opportunities. In fact, if David was here, I expect he would probably echo this, that you and I have more opportunity to share the gospel than he does. I remember as an unsaved person, if I saw a preacher coming, you know what I did? I went the other way. I know what he's going to do, but if it was just another dumb old redneck like me coming down, you know, hey, I'll talk to him about deer hunting and see what's going on while I wait here in line. So you and I may have indeed more opportunities to share Christ than even a pastor does. All right, well, let's jump into Acts chapter 17, starting in verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed when he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with those who worship God, as well as in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also debated with him. Some said, "What is this ignorant show-off trying to say?" Excuse me. Others replied, "He seems to be a preacher of foreign deities because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection." All right, well, what's going on here? They're talking about Paul is in Athens. How did he get there to Athens? If you back up and read some of that, we're talking about his second missionary journey here, and it says that he went through, came to Athens from Berea, and he had been basically run out of Berea and Thessalonica by the Jews who were causing problems and an uproar over his preaching. So there's a map and a schematic of where he came from. So he starts out, it mentions being in Philippi, chased away from Philippi, and he goes to Berea and Thessalonica. You see where those are, and then there's Athens right there in the southern part of Greece. This is where he ends up, and he's by himself. at this particular point in time. Well, what do we know about Athens? When you look back historically at Athens, it was a booming metropolis, a thriving cultural center, much like Corinth that we had discussed before. They said it was named after Athene, the goddess of wisdom. So that wisdom is going to be kind of key to what this city's came to be, and how Paul uses that sort of to his advantage to spread the gospel. But it's the goddess of wisdom, Athene, and they named a city after it. And this is very important to them. An intellectual and cultural center of the day. They had one of the biggest universities of the time back then. It was a center of philosophy, literature, science, and art. So all of those things that I sort of consider fluff were primary focus on the people, for the people of Athens. They were a city dedicated to truth, dedicated to wisdom, hence the name. Lots of people that were the brightest and best from all over the world would live there, home to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. I would wonder if you ask kids nowadays, grab your average 7th grader and ask them if they've ever learned anything about Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. I bet they've never heard those names. Sad, but that's where they came from. Great philosophers. And then Epicurus and Zeno, we're going to learn a little bit about them in a minute. As many as 30,000 statues had been erected as idols to various scholars in the city. And here was a great quote. One scholar noted it was easier to find a god in Athens than it was to find a man. God with a little g, some idol that they were worshiping. They were everywhere, 30,000. Name something that there's 30,000 of in Appomattox? Gas stations? Not even that many Quick Marts in Appomattox, is it? Churches? There's a church on every corner, but we don't have 30,000 churches in Appomattox. So the point is, these people had all of this around them constantly. Statues to idols may have been worship places and altars to this particular god, or a shrine or something like that, all throughout Athens. So Paul was there in Athens, and he's looking at everything that's going on around there. And it says he was waiting for them. Waiting for them. Who was he waiting for? Well, back up a little bit. If you go back into verse 13 and 14, it says that Silas and Timothy were still in Berea. Paul had aggravated or upset the Jews so much that he was whisked away real quick. Silas and Timothy may not have done as much upsetting of the people. So they stayed behind and were tying up loose ends. Paul is whisked away. He goes down to Athens. So while he's down there in Athens, he's waiting for them. And that part in blue is kind of interesting. The way it's worded and the background that leads up to this, they said that it was like Paul was there, but he was waiting for his team to get there, and then they would launch their ministry like they have done in other places over time. But because of the way he was when he was looking around in Athens, seeing what was going on, it was absolutely shocking to him of what he was seeing with 30,000 idols all over the place. It was so shocking and distressing that he decides, I'm not waiting for the team to come in. I'm going to start sharing the gospel right now with whoever I can get an opportunity to. So it says that Paul was deeply distressed by what he saw when he looked around at all these idols. Another word for deeply distressed, they said, a better translation might have been, he was infuriated. He saw everything that was going on, that the people were worshiping meaningless statues built with human hands, and it moved him to start his ministry immediately, to start witnessing and sharing the gospel immediately. The Sunday school lesson brought up the point, or asked the question, do we stand back and look at all of the idol worship around us in America today? And are we deeply distressed by what we see? Are we deeply distressed to the point that we are infuriated by what we see? Or do we just go, oh well, and ignore it and move on with our daily life? I started to put that on there and have a discussion just about that, but we all have to kind of answer that for ourselves. And I know if I answered it, I'd probably have to be a little bit embarrassed publicly by what I'd say, because although I love and care for each one of you very much, my family very much, friends and coworkers very much, I look at some of the stuff going on in the rest of the world, and I'm deeply distressed by it, but not probably enough to make me want to go out on the streets and start witnessing and preaching the gospel. But Paul did. He was distressed by it enough to go out. And the point of the Sunday school lesson is, Klaus, you need to pay attention, think more about other people instead of just yourself and those that you love. So Paul looked around. He saw everything that the greatest artists were doing. There's a picture of one of the alleys, or whatever you want to call it, streets in Athens, where they had all of these monuments up. You can still go there today and see a whole lot of them. Some of them are in museums, some of them are still placed. But this was a city full of idols, a city wholly given to idolatry. The religious center of Greece, and virtually every deity known to man could be worshipped there. And I underline the word virtually. Why? There was one God they didn't worship there. Isn't it amazing? You pick 30,000, but you can't pick the right one? You think by accident they would somehow have come upon the ability to worship the one and only true God, but they didn't. Paul viewed Athens as a city of lost humanity, all doomed to a Christless eternity because of rampant pagan idolatry. Again, compare what Paul saw to what we see today in the world. Rampant pagan idolatry. Man, we've got to be in the exact same position that Paul was in. So the Sunday school lesson was driving home that we need to look at it the same way Paul looked at it. We need to be infuriated by what we see. Infuriated to the point that we're driven to action, to do something. And each one of us can. Each one of us will meet people one-on-one. It may not be to go out and preach on the street corner in downtown Danville or Roanoke. I was going to say Appomattox or Lynchburg, but that's fairly peaceful. Danville, maybe, Roanoke. That might not be what God is calling us to do today, but we can agree He's certainly calling us to talk to everyone that we run into every day about the gospel, right? And sooner or later, you're going to have somebody sit down on the train next to you. One of the commentaries put it this way. They didn't know which God to hang on to, and so they believed all were somehow equal and that all roads lead to heaven. Remember how we had talked about this several times, the spokes on a wheel example, and every single spoke, no matter which one you get on, you're going to the center of the wheel? Intellectual types have been like that ever since the beginning of time. They seem to be unable or unwilling to discover the truth about God. And so, religion becomes a matter of personal taste. Kind of like our taste in clothes or the color of our houses. There's no right, no wrong. If you like Hinduism as opposed to Buddhism, it's no big deal. It's like preferring Big Macs to chicken nuggets. And if there is a God, well, He'll understand. Everybody was just trying to reach Him, this God, in different ways. It shouldn't make any difference as long as you're sincere. And you've heard people say it over and over again. You can be sincere as you want about something, but all you really can be is sincerely wrong, seriously wrong, to the point that you have eternal consequences. So Paul saw all of this, and he started preaching the gospel. And what was the response? Some good, some indifferent, and a lot bad. That's what he did, and that's what we must do. We must make Christ's presence known to this world, make an impact for Christ. So this theme is something we talk about constantly, comes up over and over again, and I think it's because it's always been, well, at least in my lifetime anyway, one of the Christian church's greatest weakness. We need to do better. All right. In what ways is our world similar to Paul's world? What idols do people worship today?
Money is the idol, I think.
Number one idol, money. Yeah. People worship money.
Recreation.
There you go. Recreation. That's not even number two. That's number 1.5. Recreation. Yeah. Bev and I talk about it all the time. People think that you go to work, and when you get off work, it's all playtime all the time. Recreation. You got to figure out a way to entertain yourself. Get on the computer, online, play video games, go to the beach, whatever. We all know ways people recreate. In a sense, I do that in my garden. That's my recreation. Pulling weeds is recreation. Bobby cows are work, but they're also recreation, aren't they? Bobby knows what I'm saying. What else? Houses, yeah. Bigger and better, yeah. And never satisfied, right?
It's a little complicated, but religion.
Religion? How so?
We worship the way we believe. Other people worship the way they believe, and the twain will never meet because we are the only. And I'm talking about we, the religion.
Right.
Each religion is the only one that is right. Therefore, I'm going to worship my religion.
Right.
And we need to realize that religion and God are nowhere near the same thing.
Exactly. And if we were all worshiping the one God, then all well and good. But we do know there is only one God and there's only one way to God. But oftentimes we put a wall around us and they put a wall around them. And it's just two bubbles that can't meet. Sure thing. Well, again, dealing with this, greatly distressed about what we see, they brought up this concept of pluralism. Anybody ever heard that term used before? There's economic pluralism, political pluralism, religious pluralism, easy for me to say. And some of that is good in certain situations. There's some tolerance that you should have for other people's political views, for other people's economic views. But when it comes to the Christian faith, we really don't have that option. We put it, I didn't put the verse up there today, but we had it up week before last, I think. The gospel says there's only one way. Plain and simple. There is no other name under which people come except through Jesus Christ. So if you're following Jesus Christ, you can follow him differently than me, for sure. But you can't follow a cow in India and get to heaven. Just ain't going to happen. And we need to be able to say that to people when they're off on these different tangents. How about something as simple as horoscopes. Anything wrong with Christians reading their horoscope? Everybody thinks it's a trick question. The Bible says not to.
I think you get suckered into it. You might start just by reading it, and then you get deeper into it. You get to thinking, oh, well, maybe this is right or whatever.
Yep.
So if you're not tempted, if you don't start it, then you don't have that to face.
Yeah. So it becomes a slippery slope. I look at it the first time and I kind of laugh about it. Or I share the fortune cookie with a friend of mine of what it said. And then you go, well, that sort of worked out the way they said. Maybe I ought to look at this a little closer. And the next thing you know, you're dialing the toll call psychic hotline and talking to Wanda in who knows where on the phone about a psychic can talk to you on the phone. It would be bad enough to go into the tent and have her look at your palm. You know, I laugh at that. But now we can just get on our phone and talk to the psychic. Huh? $1 a minute. Now, how do you know that? Yeah, it shows the rates on there, right? Okay. $1 a minute to have somebody tell you about that. How about the lucky rabbit's foot? Carrying around your lucky rabbit's foot. How about when I go bowling, I have to wear my lucky bowling shirt? That's the bowling shirt I bowled a 300 in. Not really, I've never done that, but if I did, I probably would hang on to that shirt. I'd be wearing the same socks if I'm superstitious. Well, all of that's kind of simple. That's harmless, right? It does sort of make you think, though, that there is a slippery slope. If you look at those things, investigate them, give them credence, and engage in those things, then you get to the point where maybe you're willing to take another step, and then another step. And then maybe you get into the voodoo and black magic, right? It can lead to that. You can see how it would go there. And we would all agree, no, Christians can't be involved in any of that stuff. And then you're right into the occult, Satan worship. But you see how this is a line to go in. So we need to think about those things. Because if you're going to say, they made a good point in the Sunday school lesson, if you're going to say that pluralism is okay when it comes to faith matters, if you're going to say, who am I to say him worshiping the cow in India is wrong, then you kind of have to accept everything. If you're not going to stand on Christ alone, you have to accept everything. The cow worship or whatever it is, and we could give lots of examples. I don't mean to beat up on the Hindus, but that's, to me, one of the easiest ones that's kind of easiest to debunk. Then you have to accept it all. And what the Sunday school lesson was telling us is that we need to be willing to do exactly what Paul did. He came to a city where they were worshiping everything, but he said, no, there's only one way. Plain and simple. There's only one way. And he said that at a cost. Multiple times in different cities, he said that at a cost. We've seen that many, many times. Verse 17 goes on to say, so he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and those who worship God, as well as in the marketplace, every day with those who happened to be there. So, before anybody even gets there to sort of come and back him up, Paul goes into the synagogues, like he did in every city, first place he'd go, and he was worshiping with two different types, or he was reasoning, debating, discussing, teaching with two different groups of people. the Jews who naturally would be in the synagogue, and then it said those who worship there. And those were people they described as likely Gentiles who followed Jewish teachings. So they were in the synagogue too, albeit probably in a separate area from the Jews, but they would have been in the synagogue as well. And then he was in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. So every day, Paul took his personal time and was either in the synagogue or went to the marketplace. So he did go on the street corners. The marketplace was the busy intersection. It's where everybody was every day, getting different supplies and such. After surveying the city and seeing its passion for idolatry, he made his presence felt among both the Jews and the Gentiles. On one hand, he reasoned in the synagogue with those two types of people, the Jews and Gentiles who worshiped God the Jewish way. Also known as God-fearers, they were likely Gentiles who had adopted the beliefs of Judaism. Both groups were allowed to worship in the synagogue. Paul took advantage of the opportunity to share Jesus as the Messiah with both groups of people. He probably did most of his work among the Jews on the Sabbath while spending the rest of his time with others during the day in the marketplace. In the first century, a city's main marketplace, also known as the Agora, was more than just a place to buy food and supplies. It was the community social center. So it was the local country store where everybody went down to chat. For Athens, it was also where the educated men came to argue philosophy and religion. In fact, Luke later noted concerning such educated men, he said, quote, "Now all the Athenians and the foreigners residing there spent their time on nothing else but telling or hearing something new." This made the marketplace a great place for Paul to share the truth of the gospel. So he noted himself that in this city of reason and philosophy, that's all the people wanted to do. They made the point here, again, driving home the same point. We can't really wait for people to come to Elon Baptist Church and sit here in the pew and hear David preach, or Jeremy, or Davy. Very few people are going to come in off the street and sit here and listen to the preaching every Sunday, right? And we can't just wait for those folks and then say, okay, well, here's my chance to minister to somebody. We have the opportunity to go and spread the gospel wherever we are, at the food line, at your workplace, at your kids' Little League game, whatever it is, lots of opportunities. Okay, remember how we talked about these two philosophers, Epicurus and Zeno. Epicurus and Zeno. Who in the world were these people? Well, you had these two different groups of philosophers in Athens at the time. And the Epicureans were materialists who focused on experiencing as much pleasure and avoiding as much pain as possible in life. They were focused on pleasure. All pleasure, no pain. Wouldn't America make a bunch of good Epicureans today? They rejected the idea of an afterlife, making this life so important and allegiance to any particular god meaningless. They did not deny the existence of gods, but they saw them as being totally indifferent to humanity and merely as a tool for learning more about how to enjoy life. So they admitted that God exists, or gods exist. They knew there was somebody out there in control, maybe even as a creator of everything. But those gods only existed to provide opportunities for these people to enjoy life. Eat, drink, and be merry. Live it up. Enjoy it all. That was the Epicurean philosophy. Then there was another group of philosophers, the Stoics. The Stoics were founded by this guy named Zeno the philosopher. If you can't read that headstone there, it says, "Rest in peace, Zeno the philosopher. Dead, but so what?" And the two guys standing over his grave says he was a Stoic's Stoic. The Stoics thought that God's played a more active role in human affairs. In fact, they believed that deity resided in everything, both in humanity and in the physical world. This pantheistic perspective emphasized harmony in all things. Stoics believed that a divine spark was the rational principle that held all things together and allowed people to find their purpose when they lived by reason. And since divinity lived in every person, the Stoics had a belief in the universal brotherhood of man and emphasized duty and self-discipline. So they believed in human reasoning and self-sufficiency. And then you had the Epicureans that were just all teenagers. Enjoy life. You know what the problem with America is? This is class, not Sunday school lesson. There are a lot of adults acting like teenagers, aren't they? Enjoy life all the time. Boy, we got a whole lot of them out there. All right, so you got these two different groups of people. What are some examples of how these philosophies are present in today's culture? We've already talked about the Epicurean side of it pretty much. Entertainment, pleasure, all good times with no commitment to anything. How about the Stoics? Are there any examples of that in today's culture? Pursue human reasoning and self-sufficiency. Well, and you think about that, there are a lot of people out there. I've had people tell me point blank, I don't need God to be a good person. That's a Stoic philosophy. I can be good on my own. I don't need God for that. I can get to heaven on my own. Self-sufficiency. Human reasoning. I have the ability to figure things out. Why do I need God? All right, so you got all of these philosophies out there that were ever present there and more increasingly present in America now. How are these worldviews in opposition to biblical values and the gospel message? A focus on this world. Yep.
It's all about me.
Me. Yep, me. My three favorite topics, me, myself, and I. So if they're focusing on themselves, they're not dependent on God. The Bible tells us we need to be dependent on God and not focus on ourselves. So lots of ways that this is in direct opposition to what the Bible teaches. Seeking fulfillment in pleasure versus a relationship with Jesus. So they think they can find happiness with just pleasure rather than with God. I don't need God. I have the ability to figure this thing out. And what do you see with people over and over again who take that to the extreme? Well, if I just get a new car, then I'll be happy. I'll find pleasure. What happens to that new car after a year? The newness is worn off. That new car smell is gone. So what do? Go get another new car. Look at the one that's on the market now. This one can pull more, go faster, has its own navigation system. The stupid Teslas now, what do they say? They drive themselves. Sorry, it fell off. They drive themselves. So it's lots of stuff.
And they say love is a Subaru.
That's right. If you want true love, drive a Subaru, right? I used to drive a Subaru. Yep. Relationships. I don't need God, but if I can just get married, if I can just find the right person, the one I got ain't worth a darn right now, but I think if I find the right one, I'll finally be happy. Does it ever work? 5 marriages later, did they finally find the right one? Are they happy? Never are. There's no replacement for our need for God. Okay, we're not going to get finished, are we? Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some said, what is this ignorant show-off trying to say? So they insulted him. As he was talking, they would call him a seed picker. This was a derogatory term to call somebody a seed picker. That he just went around and picked up whatever he could find and put it together and called it his own. A babbler or a seed picker. You know, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if the worst thing somebody ever called me was a seed picker? That term was derogatory back then, and now I think if you call somebody a seed picker, they wouldn't even blink. But that was a bad term back then. He seems to be a preacher of foreign deities. So others who heard about this, it kind of perked them up. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense. This was a city where you had tons and tons of people always looking for the next god. And Paul comes in and says, hey, I got a god, let me tell you about him. Well, they would be all ears, wouldn't they? Hey, we got 30,000. What's 30,001? If there's one we don't have, we'll go for it. We need to take opportunities just like Paul did and look for those chances to share Christ every day. Whenever we share the gospel, we need to include the resurrection, just like Paul did, and what it means for us personally. And always remember the exact same thing that happened to Paul is going to happen to us. Some are going to like it, some are going to be indifferent, and some are going to be outright aggravated by it. But we keep on. Well, it goes on to say that Paul then, because he talked to these people, he got opportunities to speak to even more people. He stood in front of the Areopagus. This was a council made up that determined all of the religious and philosophical topics of the time, and he gets the opportunity to come. They say, come and tell us about this God that you're preaching. He gets the opportunity to go up there and talk to them. And it's kind of interesting, when he goes up there and talks, he doesn't condemn them. He doesn't say, you people got 30,000 statues. You're the dumbest box of rocks I've ever met in my life. He starts off by basically complimenting them and looking for ways to engage them. The Sunday school lesson wanted us to take that as an example. When you see someone who has a I love cows shirt, Bobby, then that means you've got a point of commonality. If he's got a John Deere tractor, you can go tell him why John Deere's are the biggest piece of junk, the most overpriced paid pieces of junk on the market, right? No, Tom doesn't like that example. Well, you tell him that John Deere's the best, and now you got an in with him. Well, this is what Paul was doing, and we need to take that as an example. Well, they go into a lot. I'm going to jump forward and close with this. I said I was going to wrap things up on time. We got sidetracked. In a masterful way, Paul used this inscription to the unknown God as a point to introduce his audience to the one true God. Since they acknowledged their ignorance of the divine nature, he would tell them about it. You can't read the words on there. That's a picture of a bird and a snake coming right up behind him, getting ready to eat him. And it says, ignorance is bliss. And then underneath in small letters it says, but the feeling is only temporary. Sooner or later, ignorance comes with a cost, doesn't it? That bird can chirp and enjoy life, not paying attention to what's around him, but if he's not paying attention, it'll catch up to him. And so their ignorance was the exact same way. Paul says, let me tell you about the one and only true God. You're worshiping in ignorance. You don't know this. Now, this was the city center of Athens, the center of all philosophy and knowing. The city named wisdom. They wanted wisdom. And when they found out that there was something that they were ignorant about, something they didn't know about, they were intrigued. They were desperate. Saying that y'all were worshiping ignorance was not the derogatory phrase that we would consider it today. They used it in a different way. It simply meant you don't know about this. Let me tell you. And from the philosopher's standpoint, the fact that there was some God out there they didn't know about, that excited them. Tell us about him. We want to know. This is where we're supposed to know all of these things. And Paul took advantage of that opportunity to share the gospel with them. All right, well, we're going to wrap up there. Sorry for running over, but final words and thoughts. Questions, concerns, and comments. All righty, well, let's close with a word of prayer. Lord Jesus, thank you again for this beautiful day that you've given us. Thank you for the opportunity to freely open your word. Thank you for the example that Paul gives us in how to appropriately and effectively share the gospel with those that we run into every single day. Lord, give us Paul's heart and desire to share your gospel. Give us the commitment and dedication to your command to go out and spread the gospel. On our own, Lord, we are quite ineffective and incapable. But with you, all things are possible. I just pray, Lord, that you would anoint and bless each one here today towards that end. We love you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty, folks. See you next week.